Today I'm going to be making some raspberry mousse domes which are coated in chocolate and have a biscuit base. Now I'm doing these in particular for Grace, one of my great nieces, who had these at afternoon tea when she was in England on holiday, and she loved them, and her birthday's coming up, so I thought I would try to replicate those. And for that, what I'm going to do is, because there are different stages, there's the coating moulds in chocolate, there's making the mousse, there's making the biscuits, and there's putting everything together. I'll tell you the ingredients for each part as we go. So for this part, what I actually need is a mould. I have this one and I have another one if I need it later on. And I have 300 grams of chocolate chips. Now I'm using milk chocolate chips because that's what Grace likes, and I'm going to melt those over a pan of simmering water, so a bain-marie. Now the water should not be touching the bowl, you just heat the water until it's simmering, and the heat will simply heat the glass or the metal bowl and melt the chocolate. Once it's all smooth and melted, we let that begin to cool down, and while it's cooling down so that it thickens up slightly, I'm going to chill my mould in the fridge, and then I'll be back to show you how we go on to coat the inside of the moulds with the chocolate. So what I've done is I've melted the chocolate on my bain-marie, and it's still warm, and I have to coat the inside of these domes with the chocolate, but you have to be careful with that because you don't want it all to run down into the bottom, and when you turn the dome out you have a very thick top. So because I've got this chilled and I'm standing it on an ice tray as well, I'm going to take a little bit of the chocolate and I'm going to try to use a teaspoon and run it round the side of the dome, to try to get a reasonably even thickness. And then spread it into the bottom as well. I've coated our moulds reasonably well, but I have a little bit of chocolate left over, and so when these have firmed up, I'm just going to reheat the chocolate that I have left and just brush a little bit more anywhere where I think it's too thin, and then I'm going to set these aside, allow them to firm up completely. Now you can put them in the fridge to do that if you want to. If you're using milk chocolate or dark chocolate, whichever you wish, if you do put them in the fridge, then it means that when you turn them out, the chocolate on the outside will not be shiny, but it will be dull. But that's, for me, that isn't a problem because I intend to serve these a little bit chilled anyway because of the mousse inside. So I'll be back with you when we're ready to go on to make our biscuits and our mousse. With our chocolate in the moulds and setting, I'm going to get on and make a sablé biscuit, and I'm going to use for the biscuit this little tin which will create biscuits of just about the right size to drop into my moulds once I put the mousse in. But I won't be filling them to the top, obviously, because I only want thin biscuits. So this recipe, which is already on my blog, which is for sablé breton, but I'm going to do it again here now, will make more than I actually need, but that's fine because I can chill the rest of the dough and I can cook those as biscuits later. So for the ingredients, I have 150 grams of softened butter. I have 45 grams of ground almonds. I have 125 grams of cake and pastry flour. You could use plain flour. I have 90 grams of icing sugar, 1 medium egg, which would be large in the USA, and into that I've also put 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and I have 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which I'm going to put into the flour straight away. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cream the softened butter together with the icing sugar until it's pale and fluffy. So I'm going to use my hand mixer to do all of this. I'm going to start it on slow to begin with, simply because I don't want the icing sugar to go everywhere. So I'll just press it down a little bit into the butter. Now, as I say, we want this to be pale and fluffy, so it'll take a couple of minutes to do probably. And then I'm going to add into that the almond extract and the egg yolk. Just the egg yolk. If I said egg before, it's egg yolk. And with that mixed in, I'm going to add in the ground almonds and mix those until they're combined. And with that combined, I'm simply going to add in my flour and salt. I'm just going to mix the salt in a little bit, and then I just want to mix this until it's just coming together. I don't want to over mix this, so I'm going to do it on slow speed. And I think that's just about good enough. I'm going to scrape it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that onto some plastic wrap, I'm going to form it into a log. I'm just going to shake that into a log, probably about 8 inches long. Like that. And I'm going to chill that in the fridge for at least 2 hours so that it firms up and I can cut it and put it into my biscuit or the tin that I want to bake the biscuits in. So I'm just going to check, yes, that's a decent size. So I'll be back in a couple of hours when this is chilled and we're ready to go on to bake the biscuits and also to make our raspberry mousse. I've chilled our pastry for about 4 hours because I had something else to do. 2 hours would have been long enough. And I have this little tin here because I want to contain the diameter of the cookies as I cook them. And what I'm going to do, this log would make 12 to 16 cookies, which will be about that thick or that high. I want much thinner ones than that, so I'm going to cut 12 thin slices and put them in here, and I'm going to bake them in my oven at 160 Celsius or 325 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. For thicker ones, cutting it into 12 or 16 pieces, I would bake at 325 Fahrenheit, 160 Celsius for up to 30 minutes. So I just cut very thin slices because this is just to give a little bit of texture to our raspberry mousse. And this isn't round, but they will spread as they bake, which is why I have them in this little tin. So with the dough sliced thinly and put into the tin, I'm going to bake those for 20 minutes, then let them cool down for a couple of minutes before I turn them out. Then I'll come back and show you those, and we'll go on to make our raspberry mousse. Well, it's the next day now because baking our cookies took longer than I wanted to. So this is what the little cookies look like, and they're very soft and crumbly, so they will go into the mousse once we've made the mousse. And so for the mousse, I have 1 cup of raspberry puree. For that I used 400 grams of frozen raspberries, pureed them and put them through a sieve so that we got all the seeds out and as much of the pulp in as we could. I have 4 medium egg yolks, which would be large in the USA, and 1 whole egg, medium egg, which would be large in the USA. I have 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, 45 millilitres. I have 135 grams, which is 1.5 cups minus 1 tablespoon of sugar, caster sugar I'm using. and I have 480 millilitres, which is 2 cups of whipping cream. Then I have 7 grams of gelatin powder and 1/4 cup, 60 millilitres of water. So the first thing I'm going to do is to put the gelatin powder into the water and just give that a stir around and leave that to begin its process. And then the next thing to do is to put the egg yolks and the eggs into a bowl, add the sugar and the lemon juice, and then I'm going to whisk that over a bain-marie, a pot of barely simmering water, and I'm going to whisk those until they're all combined and they reach a temperature of 80 Celsius, which is 175 Fahrenheit. When I've done that, I'll be back with you and we'll go on to the next step. So our eggs have come to that temperature, 80 Celsius, and what I'm going to do is pour in my gelatine, which has thickened up, and I'm going to whisk that in. And with that whisked in, I'm going to pour in my 240 millilitres or 1 cup of strawberry, and actually it looks as though I've just about got 1 cup. So all of that goes in. And I'm going to whisk that in. And I'm then going to set that aside to cool down, and as that's cooling down, I'm going to whip this cream to soft peaks. Okay, so I've whipped the cream until it's come to a soft peak stage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that cream into the raspberry mixture in 2 additions. I want to fold it quite gently so that we don't knock all the air out of the cream. So with that folded like that, the next thing to do is actually to put that into our moulds. So I'm going to take some of the mousse and just put it into the moulds which I've had chilling in the fridge. And then I'm going to take one of our cookies and I'm going to drop it onto the mould, onto the mousse, sorry. Just like that. But I want to leave a little gap around it so that we can then fill that with more chocolate. And with those like that, I'm actually going to put them into the fridge and chill them so that the mousse sets up before we add some chocolate. I've got another 6 which I will also do now, but I'll be back to show you adding the chocolate so that it will coat the top of the biscuit as well a bit later on. I've chilled our raspberry mousse domes and the mousse is set nicely. So what I've also done now is melted another 150 grams of chocolate, including the excess that I had left over from the first part of the video, and I'm going to simply spoon some onto each one, going down the sides so that it joins up with the chocolate that's already there. And then I'm going to smooth that over to make it level. So I've covered those bases, as they will be, with more milk chocolate, and I'm going to put those back into the fridge and allow them to chill until they're firm. Then they'll be ready to turn out, and when they're ready to turn out, I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of white chocolate over the top, and then I'll come back and show you the results. Here's one of our finished raspberry mousse domes. I've simply decorated them with a little bit of white chocolate and then these edible paper flowers. These are for a children's party, so that's why they're looking just like that. I'm not going to break into it because they are for the children's party. But the mousse does taste very, very good because I've got some extra there in the fridge. And so that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, which will take you to this recipe, and I'll put a link to it below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.